Hey everybody, this is Phil at Realty One Group MVP. I wanted to call and just to have a conversation with you today about a subject that has a lot of people confused. And hopefully this little tiny videotape that I'm sending out to you might help to just clear the air a little bit. And it has to do with buyers and buyers agents working together. Many of you may or may not have heard that back in August of 2024, there was a settlement between the National Association of Realtors and the Department of Justice that concerned the buyer's agent compensation. And so the effort was to be able to protect the consumer and to disclose how buyer's agents are compensated. So before we go to say where we are, it may help to know where we've been. So in the past, typically, when a seller decided to place their property on the market, they would hire a listing agent to prepare the property, to market the property, and help get the property closed. And in that agreement, the seller would agree in advance to pay a certain percentage of the purchase price to the listing agent and also a buyer's agent. That was called a cooperating broker fee. So what occurred was that at closing, the buyer would close their transaction, and on the HUD settlement statement, it would show the amount that the listing agent would receive in compensation and the buyer's agent would receive in compensation. Happened this way. I've been selling real estate for over 23 years now, and feels like sometimes 100 years, but that was how it has been for decades. But because of the lawsuit and the settlement between the National Association of Realtors, NAR, and the Department of Justice, there were some changes that occurred that required more disclosure on compensation for buyer's agent compensation. So fast forward from August 2024 to today, just so you know, is that the changes occurred affect how buyer's agents are compensated. Number one, buyer's agents are compensated by the buyer. And so that's an agreement between the buyer and the buyer's agent for a percentage of the purchase price or a flat fee or a dollar amount that the buyer will pay for their buyer's agent services. That's the clearest definition. Now, there's a couple of things that I will tell you, and this, of course, this video is not going to be long enough to go through all of the information, but I would tell you, I think it'll put some meat on the bone. So the first of all, we want to talk about that these written agreements, okay, and that means that discloses the terms and conditions, the times and the amounts and the services that will be provided by the buyer's agent to the buyer. Now, one of the things that I think it's so important to know is that broker fees for compensation are completely negotiable, so that the buyer can know that in advance, as part of their closing costs, what they could be expected to pay at closing. Just that simple. The buyer-broker agreement amount can't be on any multiple listing service, MLS, at all. So really there's four things just to discuss. What the settlement means for home buyers is, number one, you will sign a written agreement before touring any house. Two, before signing the agreement, you should ensure that it reflects the terms and conditions that were negotiated with your agent, and that you understand exactly the services and value that will be provided for how much. And so there's four components of this, and the agreement will be for a specific and conspicuous disclosure amount or rate to the real estate agent will receive. The compensation, the objective could be a dollar amount, could be a flat fee, or a percentage of the purchase, and then a conspicuous statement that says that the broker fees and compensation is negotiable and is not set by law. Now, these written agreements apply to both in-person and virtual tours. And so just to kind of let you off the hook a little bit is that you don't need a written agreement if you're just speaking to an agent about what they do, If you're at an open house, that's not necessary. Or if you're calling them to ask them about their services. And now it is interesting. So that was the 4 things. So, and when a buyer looks and sees about what is required when they purchase a property, the expense of the buyer's agent compensation is one of your closing costs, including in any other closing costs like title costs, inspection costs, doc stamps on deeds, etc. And of course, if you're purchasing a loan, your loan closing costs as well, plus taxes and insurance prepaid. Now, in a specific transaction, the seller may agree in advance to pay a percentage of the purchase price or a dollar amount to go against the buyer's closing costs. So what that means for the buyer is that a portion of their closing costs may be picked up and paid at closing by the seller as a credit to the closing costs. So one of the things I wanted you to look at is that, so that's why it helps to work with a real estate agent as your buyer, because they can know as they structure a transaction about how to protect you. So at Realty One Group MVP, we look at the 3 Ps. One is we want to protect our buyers, we want to prosper our buyers, and we want to promote our buyers. So what that means for you is that so that you can see the properties that you want, the properties that that will meet your needs and meet your goals. Second is to make sure that we protect our buyers as best we can to ensure that the smoothest transaction as possible. And also we want to prosper. That is to help in the transaction, so they keep their financial and also their contractual agreements as simple and easy as possible for them. So there you have it. Just a few minutes. I wanted to talk to you about the buyers and buyers agents working together in order to see a property. Number 1, you got to sign at least a showing agreement or a broker agreement for a period of time. 2 is that the buyer's agent compensation is a closing cost expense to every buyer. So what that means for you is that either at a closing, you're going to pay your buyer's agent's broker compensation, or you're going to pay that broker compensation and the seller to give a credit of the closing costs as a credit. You know, one of the things that I've talked to many buyers, and they seem to be reluctant about signing showing agreements or buyer agent agreements in advance. The number one thing is that it's required. And so it's not an option. It's not something to get by on. My encouragement to any buyer is that if they are speaking to an agent that doesn't require a buyer's broker agreement or a showing agreement to tour a property, they're breaking the law. And what that means is that if they're not requiring that and they're wanting to skid around the law, well, what other things would they also consider skidding around? One of the things that we said is we want to prosper our buyers and sellers, and we just can't do that and protect them when we're breaking the law. So while it may be unusual to sign a showing agreement or a buyer broker agreement, it may be unusual now, but in a few months it won't be. But those that are out there not having their buyers sign these agreements are breaking the law. Bye-bye.